Persecution is raging across Nigeria and many other areas of the world. I am joined today by Brad Brandon, CEO of Across Nigeria. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. Glad to be on with you, Billy.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. You know, Nigeria is a nation that we have talked about a lot here at CBN News, and it's important to continue to talk about because I think a lot of people, particularly in the Christian church in America, do not realize the extent of the persecution happening there in Nigeria. Before we get into some of those details, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Across Nigeria?
Yeah, Across Nigeria has basically two focuses. One is to help the persecuted church in northern Nigeria. And if you're not familiar with what's going on in northern Nigeria, it is right now the most dangerous place to be a Christian. So more Christians were killed in northern Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. In fact, not by slim margins either. Last year, 70% of all the Christians martyred in the entire world, 70% of them were killed in northern Nigeria. So the numbers are staggering. And already this year, there's been over 7,000 Christians that have been killed in northern Nigeria. So Across Nigeria works in those areas. I spend most of the year in northern Nigeria helping persecuted Christians. We have a refugee center. We help people restart their lives after, losing family, losing everything because they became a Christian. The other side to our ministry is that we also reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we do that through our schools. We have schools that cater to Fulani Muslims. Fulani Muslims are of the most illiterate children in the entire world. So we're trying to change that. We also help them with food and medical opportunities, things like that, anything we can do to show them the love of Christ. So those are the twofold focuses that we have here at Across Nigeria.
You know, as you're talking about the work you do, obviously this is dangerous work. I mean, you're in a part of the world, you mentioned this is the worst place to be a Christian in the world right now. And the fact that the vast majority of the killings and chaos targeted at Christians are happening there in Nigeria. What is it like for you to know that the work that you're doing, and we're going to get into the specifics of that even more, carries with it a real danger to you as well?
I'm so used to it at this point that it doesn't bother me probably as much as it once does, but we're very security conscious. I mean, we work in areas that are controlled by Boko Haram, areas that are controlled by ISWA, which is the Islamic State of West Africa. We are sometimes 12 hours into areas that are controlled by them, and there's really no help that we're going to be able to get if something happens. So we're always security conscious. But our goal, I look at it like the work we're doing is way more important than we are. It's way bigger than we are. And we stay focused on that, stay focused on our calling, and try not to think too much about the dangers that we're in. But we are in them all the time.
So you're there. How often? You said about half of the year. How often are you in Nigeria? Okay.
I'm in Nigeria about half the year. Yeah.
Okay. So this work, and for people to understand, I really want people to wrap their heads around this because in America, we are so conditioned to have freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Of course, we can debate the confines of that and people will have those discussions and debates. But the reality is what we're talking about in Nigeria is an otherworldly persecution that is so intense. If you make a decision for Christ, there's a target on your back immediately, I would assume, obviously, based on this. You know, with so much of this is so dark and difficult and negative, what are you seeing, though, that gives you some hope?
Oh, that's a great question because a lot of times people want to talk about all of the negative things that are happening, and there's plenty of those to discuss. And sometimes I feel like when we talk about that too much, we give the devil more platform than maybe we should. Amazing things are happening. We're seeing thousands of Muslims come to know Jesus Christ. We're seeing lives changed. I mean, literally transformed. And again, this is a part of the world where if you become a Christian, it's under Sharia law. And under Sharia law, there's a doctrine called Arim Asharif, which means honor killing. That means if you become a Christian, it is legal to kill you. Your family can kill you. They can hire somebody to kill you. That's like a foreign concept to a lot of us here in the West, but it's an everyday occurrence in northern Nigeria. we're seeing people put their faith in Christ despite all of the dangers and all of the controversies and the violence. Even though they're losing everything, the government can come in and seize their properties, take their children, freeze their bank accounts. They come to us with the clothes on their back, and when they do, they are invigorated. It's like watching a man who's been walking in the desert for a week with no water, and finally he gets a drink of water, and it just invigorates every part of their lives, and it's exciting to see that. And we're seeing that happen from the east to the west in northern Nigeria. God is at work in the hearts of the Muslim community, not just in northern Nigeria, but all around the world.
Well, you know, we hear stories of people having dreams, of Muslims having dreams of Jesus. We hear these radical, amazing. Do you encounter those kinds of stories there, the supernatural ones?
Yeah, we have many times encountered, in fact, what you just mentioned, dreams. That seems to be a pretty pervasive thing that's happening right now throughout the Muslim world. We've had people have a series of dreams where God revealed to them who Jesus Christ was. And even some, God is asking them questions about Allah and the Quran, questions they can't answer, and then revealing to them that Jesus Christ is the answer to all of those questions. And so a lot of times they'll come to us already knowing the full gospel, even though they didn't hear it growing up. They're not in a part of the world where it's talked about, but they'll know the entire story, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ before we even present to them the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that is absolutely happening.
Wow. Okay. So I do want to talk about some of the negatives because I want people to understand, right? We're talking in numbers and statistics, and let's talk about the real world consequences of what this persecution looks like. Can you tell us a story that stands out in your mind to help people understand the extent of what this actually looks like in practice?
Yeah, the most vivid story I can share with you happened back in 2021. In 2021, there were 9,191 Christians that were killed. And that number is very close to my heart because the one at the end of that number is a pastor who worked for our ministry. He worked as a scout, scouting out different areas in northern Nigeria that we could go and really help the Muslim community. We did that for about 2 weeks. And at the end of that tour, we dropped him off at his house and went to pick him up the next morning. And Muslims had come in, radical Muslims had come in and burned his church. They burned his house and they hacked him to death in his bed. And we found him that way the next morning. And, one of the best parts of that story, though, is we went to go pick up his wife. And while we were transporting his wife to go catch up with his body at our refugee facility, the whole time she was praying, God, opened the hearts of the men who did this to my husband. She's truly the Elizabeth Elliot of northern Nigeria, a very unsung hero. No one would know her name, but she was praying that the entire time. And I have no doubt that God will answer those prayers in the years to come.
So as she's going to collect the body of her husband, she's praying for the salvation of the people who killed him.
That's right. Yeah, asking God to open their hearts so that they can know Jesus the same way her husband did and the same way she did.
Wow.
Or does.
I mean, how in a country too, and this is the other thing about Nigeria that people need to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about a nation where almost half of the population is Christian, right? And
yeah, that's exactly right. That's the irony of it. It's about 45, to 40, a little under 50% of the population is Christian. Most of the southern half of Nigeria is Christian. Churches on every corner. It's like it's like the South here in the United States. But all of a sudden you cross into the North and it turns into an entirely different world where 95% of the population is Muslim.
And when you look at that, you have to think, wow, how is it possible with so many Christians for this to happen? But yet there's obviously geographical areas that like the North that are controlled by some of these terrorist organizations and these groups. But it is remarkable because a lot of the persecution we see that's heavy in nations, they're in nations where you have 2%, 3% Christians. Nigeria is different. And not only is it different, it is the worst place, we can't emphasize this enough, to be a Christian in the world. When you are doing the work you're doing, I would imagine it's exhausting, it is difficult, it's dangerous. What keeps you going?
It keeps me going is just my calling. I know this is what I'm called to do. I know this is my life's purpose. When you find a lot of people call it your why you exist, why you're here. When you find your why, nothing can stop you. You continue to get back in the ring, even if you've been knocked down 1,000 times, you'll crawl back in. Being tired doesn't stop you. Nothing stops you. It's not a glamorous life at all. I make it look glamorous on social media sometimes with my posts, but it's really not. You go a couple weeks without a bath or a shower. The conditions we're in are dusty and dirty. It's not easy at all, but my calling, my purpose, the reason why God created me was to reach the northern Nigeria region with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
What sparked this for you? I mean, I think that, oftentimes we meet people like you in the middle of their work, right? But the journey of you becoming CEO and running this organization across Nigeria, what was it that led you to it?
That's a great question. The thing that led me to it was discomfort. I got very comfortable being a pastor. I had pastored several churches. I had taken the helm of a pretty big church up here in Connecticut, and had a corner office, windows on all sides, and I kind of had arrived. But what really I realized through that was that my relationship with God had become very stale and stagnant. And I started thinking things like, boy, if this is all there is to my relationship with God, I should just go play golf on Sundays. What am I doing? And I pressed into God like I had never pressed into him before, just through prayer and asking him to reveal himself, telling him, I need to know you deeper. I need to know you more. I'm not satisfied in my relationship with you. And my ministry had become largely a work of the flesh. I know that seems like contradictory. You think being a pastor in ministry is spiritual work. It can very easily become a work of your own power and your own strength. And that's where I was. And I realized that. And it just created a dissatisfaction in me. The short story is God ended up putting me in the ICU for over a month. And through the course of events, he answered my prayers and revealed himself to me. And Billy, for the first time, I became familiar with the voice of God. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. It wasn't an audible voice, but he was speaking to my spirit, like what Paul says in Romans. His spirit bears witness with my spirit. It was like that. God's spirit was speaking to my spirit. I had never had that experience before. I became a Christian when I was 7 years old. I received Christ as my Savior. I had been a pastor for 20 years at the time and never had that. And it was that moment that really transformed my entire ministry. Everything changed for me. The way I read the Bible, the way I prayed, the way I ministered. I completely let go and let God do it and realize I was just a vessel for his using.
That will change everything. I mean, how did it impact your family and the people around you and your loved ones? Because what you're doing is monumental, and it's you're pouring your life into something. This isn't a job. It's not a 9 to 5 where you're going home at the end. This is your very much, as you said, what God has called you to. So how did that impact the people around you?
My family were very supportive of it, and I love my grandchildren think I'm Indiana Jones, so I think that's kind of cool. But my wife is very supportive. My son sits on the board of directors of our organization, so most of my children are involved in that. My wife and I have 8 children, by the way, and
Wow.
and 5 grandchildren. Yeah. I think there was mixed reaction from people in the outer sphere in my life. People were very excited and very supportive, people who knew me. And then there were people on the peripheral of that who got very scared. And I think there was a level of conviction in that because they were still comfortable. They were still in that kind of stagnant relationship with God. And maybe there was a bit of comfort in seeing me have that same relationship. So when my relationship with God was transformed and I went deeper and full in and just gave everything to the Lord and laid down my life and said, I'm going to the most dangerous place in the world to minister, I think there was a level of conviction and discomfort that came in some people, and they just didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, right? Because you're kind of like, what in the world? It's so countercultural in America, right? In America, we want to. It's not just America. Everybody wants to be comfortable. Nobody wants to suffer, right? Nobody wants to have to do those things. And when you willingly put yourself in that position, I think it makes everybody else say, "What are you doing? This is crazy."
Mhm. That's
Um,
right.
when all is said and done, at the end of the day, what do you want your legacy and the legacy of Across Nigeria to be?
I don't care if anybody remembers my name. I want them to know the name of Jesus Christ. So if we want to call my life the legacy, let's look at it this way. As long as my life has introduced people to Jesus Christ and the love of God through Jesus Christ, and that's all they remember about our ministry and my life, then I would say for myself, job well done. I would hate it if people remembered me instead of Jesus and what I'm doing instead of what Jesus did.
I love that. If people want to get involved, if they want to know more about the work that you're doing, where can they go to find out more information?
Our website is acrossnigeria.org. I'll say it again. It's acrossnigeria.org. And there's so many opportunities on there. People can sign up for our weekly newsletter. We send out a weekly email that keeps people updated on exactly what's going on in our ministry, the latest news, latest update, latest things that God is doing there. We send that out every week. We send out a quarterly newsletter in the mail. People can sign up for that on our website. And then there's also opportunities for people to help financially, which is a big help to us because it takes finances to do what we do. But all of those opportunities are on our website. The biggest thing about our newsletter and our quarterly newsletter is it gives people what to pray for. Prayer is the most important thing in our ministry. Our supporters and followers praying for us. And so we're constantly letting them know this is what we need prayer for. This is what we need prayer in at this moment. And we also send out text blasts too.
Well, I love that. And people should go sign up for all of that. Follow Across Nigeria. We appreciate you taking the time, joining us and taking us through these stories. We'd love to have you back.
Hey, thanks, Billy. I really appreciate it.